Today I'm going to show you 5 different stitches you can use to embellish your quilting. Hi everyone, I'm Sarah. This is my channel, Sarah Homfray Embroidery, and although I am an embroiderer specifically, I know there's a lot of you watching out there who do quilting who are interested to put some stitching, to put some hand stitching on your quilts and are looking for stitches. So I've chosen 5 for you that I think will go really nicely for you to start your embroidery quilting journeys. So I'm going to show you the stitches first and a couple of variations of them, then we'll talk about the actual logistics of doing embroidery on your quilts. So the first stitch I'm going to show you is a back stitch, super simple stitch, but really great for doing outlines and doing lettering as well. You might want to put some of that on your quilt. I'll talk about threads a little bit later on, so I'm just going to use a perlé thread. I'm going to start with a quilter's knot, which you'll probably know how to do. And then I'm just going to do a little row of it so you can see it. I'll draw a little line on. You can pretend that's our design line. I'll talk about how to get your design on your quilts as well. So just a little forward stitch like the length of a grain of rice. Then you're going to come up ahead of yourself, that same distance, back down into the end of the previous stitch. We're going back, it's a back stitch, so up ahead, back down into the hole. You make this really lovely row of stitching, and if you want to go around curves you can. Tighter the curve, just shorten your stitches a little bit. And you can do lots of other things with this stitch as well, so you can just have your plain row stitching like that, but then you can also weave in and out of it. So I'm going to jump down to this one. This is where it's good for the lettering, so I've done myself a little S, and we can whip around the back stitch so the needle goes underneath, over the top, underneath, just going underneath each stitch from the same side each time. And we're whipping around the back stitch. It makes your line of stitching a little bit thicker, and then the other thing you can do, whipping round, you can weave it as well, so we can go in and out. So I'm going to go in from that side, weaving underneath each one, and that gives us a bit more of a decorative effect to our back stitch. So just a couple of ways that you can make use of a really simple stitch. So the second stitch I want to show you is seeding, another super simple versatile stitch, and I've got videos on all of these stitches by the way if you want to know them in more detail. I'm going to go through them quite quickly at the moment. We've got all of these, lots more detail. So I'm going to just do a double seeding, so that's a little stitch the same length as that back stitch that we just did, and 2 next to each other, 2 little parallel lines. And then we're just going to scatter them around. So this one's really good just for filling in a bit of a background if you don't want a solid stitch but you want a little bit of detail in it, you want a bit of extra colour in your quilt block, you want to pick up a colour that's already in some of your fabrics maybe. This is a good one to do. And you can do different shapes as well with it, so that's a double one. We could do little V shapes. These are really versatile. You can add these to many stitches to make a slightly different shape. So just a little V, so 2 stitches coming up away from that, going down into that hole, sharing the hole, scattering them around, changing the direction that they're facing so they look like I have just scattered them. And you can do them as close together or as far apart as you like. So that's 2 kinds of different seeding stitch. So my third stitch that I've got for you is fly stitch. So you can do these individually. So we do up and a down, we make a little loop there, come up in the middle of the loop, just away from there, we pull it downwards, and we put a little tail on it like that, a little fly. Do another one for you. So up and down, you can make them shallow if you want, you can come up close to it there and just have a little sort of V, or you can make quite a steep one like I've done there. You can do them small. These look great for little sort of seed heads. They're great for scattering around like the seed stitch we just did. You can make them little tiny ones if you want to. So the other thing we can do with this stitch is make a little row, and this makes really nice kind of leaves, long leaves. I'll draw a line on it and see what it means. I'm going to follow that down there. And I'm going to do my fly stitch either side of that line, so up and down. Up at the end of that first stitch, pull it into the little V, put the little tail on it. Up one side, down the other, make your little loop, you come up at the end of the previous stitch inside the loop, pull it down, a knot, and put that little tail on it. Before I continue with this, I just want to take a moment to thank those of you who have clicked the super thanks button, it looks like this, to show your appreciation that you're enjoying the videos. Thank you so much for that. Your names are going across the bottom of the screen now. Your support is greatly appreciated, and to our channel members and patrons as well. Another video just gone up for you. We're having a little look at something in my embroidery collection. So if you're interested in joining channel members or patrons, do check the link in the description below this video. Just coming up one side, down the other, up at the end of that inside the loop, and if you pull it toward you to tension it, put the little tail on it. A little bit more complicated this one, putting it together, but it's exactly the same as your single ones. We're just doing kind of them on top of each other. I'll do one more little tail on it like so. So we can also do a slightly different shape and make this look like a leaf. So if I just draw a little leaf shape like so, go a line down the middle, and we do exactly the same that we've just done, but we now follow the shape of the leaf. So I'm just putting that little one at the top just to give myself a point to work from, and then it's exactly the same as before, up on one side, down on the other, up in the middle, the loop, pull it down, put your little tail on, and we just follow the shape of that leaf. You can do them close together if you want to, or you can have them wide apart and have a bit more of an open space leaf. You can choose, you can do them right next to each other, and then you'll get a really solid leaf. So such a versatile stitch, this one, really good, but I'm doing exactly the same thing each time. Just put one more in, put my little tail on it. So that's 3 different things that you can do with fly stitch. So stitch number 4 is detached chain stitch. You might know this is lazy daisies, and we're going to do one of those, but I just want to show you the individual stitch first and how you make that. So up and down in the same hole, we make a little loop, come up inside that loop, we pull it towards ourselves to tension it, we make this little single chain stitch, and then to finish it I go down the other side of that thread just to catch it down, and that's a single one. So let's do a couple more of those. We can go the other way if we want, so we can go up with the loop. So you could use this like your seeding stitch if you like, and you could scatter these around. Just do one more in this direction, so up and down in the same point, up inside that loop. Don't pull it too tight or you'll lose the shape of the chain, won't get a nice circle, and down the other side just to hold it in place. So let's do some of those lazy daisies that I talked about. So let's jump over here. So we're just going to do a little group of those together, exactly the same stitch. That's going to be in the middle where I come up and down. Don't pull too tight, I think that's the trick with these. And then I'm just going to work my way round, and you can, if you want to, mark in the petals, or you can freestyle it. You can put as many in as you like. They make nice daisies. It's called lazy daisies. So if you did them in white and did loads and loads, you'd get a really lovely daisy. So coming from the middle each time out to the edge. And making that little petal shape. So if you want a little flower on your quilt, and who doesn't want a little flower on their quilt? Perfect thing for a quilt. These ones are super easy. You can change the colours. Just do all the way around to the beginning, just so you can see what that looks like. the last stitch in there. So I've got 5 in here, but you can put as many in as you want to. And that is my lazy daisy. So the last one I'm going to do is a buttonhole and a blanket stitch. You work them the same way, one is spaced out, one is close together. So I'll just show you both of those quickly. I'm going to start at the bottom and we'll take a little stitch upwards this time. We're making a loop exactly like we did for the fly stitch. We're coming up inside that loop, we tension it towards us. Come down next to it. I can vary the lengths of these. You can do a tall one if you want. You can keep them all the same length if you want to. You don't have to do them variegated like I'm doing them. If you do them close next to each other, it's a buttonhole stitch. And in the days when people used to make proper buttonholes, used to hand sew your buttonholes, this is what you would do to make sure the edge didn't come undone. So you do them nice and closely next to each other. So that's a buttonhole. And then we do the same stitch, but we leave an edge, and that's a blanket stitch. So this would be the stitch you used around the edge of a blanket. So we space them out a little bit more. Vary them again. Just do one more. I'm always coming up on that line, so I've got this nice edge to it, and then just to finish it off, because that's not finished, I go down the other side of that stitch through to the back just to secure it. So you can also make quite nice flowers with this. I'm going to draw a couple of circles. We can go from the inside to the outside, all the other way around. So start on the edge and find a middle. And we do exactly the same stitch I've just done, but we go around in a circle. We go down in the middle each time and we move it around on the outside. So we're moving around the shape and you get these really nice sort of wheel shapes. You can do nice flowers with these. Down in the middle, move it around on the outside, but exactly the same stitch otherwise. Making a loop, coming up inside the loop, tensioning it away. One more stitch just to finish that off, back down in the middle. And then if you come up at the end of where you started, back up in the middle, that will join it up, and don't forget just to go down the other side of the stitch just to hold that in place. So they make cute little flowers that way. And you can also do them the other way around. I'm going to start in the middle rather than on the edge, go out to the edge, come up in the middle, inside the loop. So now we're going to do our little spokes on the outside. So rather than going in, they're now on the outside. I'm going to turn it around that shape. Go off the circle, it's not very central. Can do longer ones there, so you try and keep them quite close together in the middle and do the spokes to the outside, and you've got a different kind of flower. So great for edgings, finishing raw edges, covering up a line where you put two pieces of rabbit together in your quilt. That will be really nice along the edge, or you can do these little decorative flowers and add a little bit of decoration with this stitch. So another really versatile one. Come to the end. Going to go back down in the middle just to finish it off. Make sure you do that beautiful little squirty flower. So I haven't shown you how to start and finish your threads on this. We do have a whole video on how to do that, so do go and check that one out to see how to start them and finish them properly, especially on a quilt that's something that might be used, and you really need to make sure you secure your ends really tightly, so do make sure you check that one out as well. Okay, so how do you actually work those stitches on your quilt? So there's 3 ways of doing it. So the first one is to do your embroidery on your fabric before you make it up into a block. So before you do your English paper piecing, this is mine up here. It's been on the go for years and years. I thought it was a good opportunity to stick it on the wall. So you can do it on the fabric first. So I've got a little sample of that here. I'll come back and look at this one in a minute, but I've done my embroidery on my fabric. I've marked on where my hexagon is, and I've just stitched around the hexagon, got it in a hoop like that. So I'll work my embroidery, then I'll take it out of the hoop, and then I can make up my paper piecing, my hexagon piece, and then I can sew them together so the embroidery is on the particular patch that I want it to be on. With that method, you need to be quite organised, so you need to plan ahead and make sure you know where you want your embroidery, and that you've got enough fabric if you want to work it in a hoop. But the second way that you can do it is to do it on your block. So you make up your block already. So I've got a little vintage one here that's really lovely. So just to show you the layers of it, there's your backing and your wadding, and there's my block there with my pieces of square patchwork on the top. So you make up your whole block first, and then you do the embroidery on that. So you can put that in a hoop, you could put it on some stretcher bars, and then you could work your embroidery on top. So obviously you'll be going over the seams with that one, and you can work it as a whole piece. I've got my little paper piecing ones here, so I could make up several of them. Rather than doing the embroidery in one, I can now do embroidery on the whole thing. This is a little piece of this go on there, so if I wanted a section on that, it's much easier to stitch on that, embroider on that, than it is on that. So that's the second way that you could do it, is just to do it when you have made one of your blocks up. The third way that you can do it is after you have made your quilt. Now, those of you who are experienced in making quilts are probably, oh, that's not a good idea. But if you had a quilt and you wanted to add something to it, or you were repairing a quilt, maybe you need to repair some embroidery on a quilt, you need to go through it. So this one is a vintage piece of quilting that I've got, and I don't know if you've seen this video, this is my beadwork video, how to do lots of different kinds of beadwork in embroidery, and I happen to do it on this piece of quilting, just thought it'd be interesting. But what it does is it makes this much stiffer, because the stitches come all the way through all the layers, so through the top layer of your quilt, through the batting, and through the backing fabric as well. So you will see the stitches on the back with this method, and it does make it a lot stiffer, but would be another technique if you wanted to try that. You could make something three-dimensional, it'll stand up on its own, because it really does make the fabric nice and stiff. So that's 3 different ways to actually stitch onto your quilt. So we just want to talk about materials and equipment. If you do want to do some embroidery on it after you've made quite a large piece up, you might want to think of a hoop. This is a quilting hoop. It's massive. I don't know why I've got one, because I've never used it. This would really be if you want to do hand quilting, so rather than quilt all the way across the length of it, you do it by hand. But if you wanted to do a large area and embroider on that, you could have a quilting one, and then there's obviously smaller ones as well. If you just want to put a little bit in a section of a hoop and just work on that in your hand, it's quite good to do that just to stabilize it a bit. Don't pull it really tight in your hoop. You don't want a tight tension, because once you take it out, your quilt isn't at tight tension and it's all going to kind of pull together. So just a nice sort of relaxed tension in your hoop, enough so that you can work on it really, but not too tight, because it will do funny things when you take it out. So different size hoops available for that. And then I just want to talk about materials that you use, because you need to just think a little bit more, if you're doing it on a quilt, about what's going to happen with a quilt. So is it going to be washed? Are you going to sit on it, lie on it, use it? Is the dog going to sit on it, lie on it, or use it? So just think about the materials you use. So embroidery threads, I've used a mix for those stitches I've just shown you. So I've used some stranded cotton. You can't go wrong with a stranded cotton. It's got 6 strands in it. You can decide how many of those you want to use. So it's very versatile thread. It's loads and loads of colours of it, and it's pretty inexpensive really. So I've used those, but on them there are some washing instructions. So do just check that the thread you use has got some washing instructions. If it hasn't, if it's a cheaper thread or you've lost the label, you might just want to check it first. Just cut off a little end of it, put it on a wet paper towel, see if the colour runs, because you do not want the embroidery thread to ruin your quilt if you should happen to hand wash it. So just something to think about there. This was a perle thread that I used, a variegated one. So this one doesn't strand, you use it as it is, but this is quite a tough thread, so this would take quite a lot of wear and tear. If you use something like a silk, very beautiful, but it is going to wear quite easily. So just have a little think about the threads that you use and make sure they're probably practical more than anything else. And I did show you something with beads on it as well. You can put beads on your quilt, they're really nice, but obviously they're glass, little pieces of glass, so they are hard, they're not going to be very comfortable. And the thing when beads fall off is the thread that you sew them on with isn't usually strong enough. That's usually the bit that breaks. So if you're going to put beads on really strong sewn thread, double it up and make sure that they're really secure and they're not going to come off. And then the same goes with anything else you put on. If you wanted to put shisha mirrors on or apply things on top, you can do all sorts of things on quilts, especially if you were doing an art quilt and not something that you were going to use necessarily. You can put whatever you like on it, but just make sure that it stays on there and it's sewn on really tightly. So a quick word on how to put your design onto your quilt. If you've got one like this, there's loads of colours in there, so you've got to be able to see it. We have got loads of different ways of transferring your design in a video all of their own, so I'm not going to go through them here, but we do have iron-on pens, we've got water erasable pens, we've got the prick and pounce method, there's a tack and trace method, trace and tack method, that way around, if you can't see your design lines very clearly. So there's lots in there. You need to find the right one for you, so do go and check that video out for how to put your design onto your quilt. So let's have a look at how to do a design for your quilt. So let's just base it on those 5 stitches that I have already shown you, and I have actually printed here some pieces of my quilt. So I put this in the printer, I scanned it in and I printed it off and I've drawn on it. So you could do that with your own quilt. You could scan that in and then you've got something you can have a little bit of a play around with before you commit to actually putting stitches on it. So let's just start with this one here. So this is when I talked about doing the embroidery on your whole block. So you put your pieces together, you sew your pieces together, you've got a large piece of fabric and then you can embroider on top of that. So I've just done a couple of seed heads and it goes right across the joins of the fabric here. And this is, you could do with the back stitch. So it could be a back stitch stem. Back stitch is great for stems. You could do these parts of the seed head as well. Then we've got the little V-shape seeding that goes on the end there, and some little fly stitches for these little seed heads that have little seeds that have blown away in the wind there. So there's 3 of those stitches in that design there. And just by drawing it on, I can see what it's going to look like before I actually stitch it. So I did the same with this little piece of quilting here. This is a little vintage piece of quilt and it got some really interesting patterns in this one. So you could use your pattern in your fabric to inform the stitches that you put in. So I've just used the buttonhole or the blanket because it's got the space, and it's a blanket stitch here along this stripe. Put a row of back stitch here, woven the back stitch, and it's sort of framing that little flower there. So just using it to sort of enhance what's already there. So we've just got some little hexagon shapes here just to show that you could just do something individually or you can join them together. So here's just a little motif in this one here. So you would need to frame up your fabric first, do your embroidery, then cut it out and make your little paper piece up. So that's just the lazy daisies and the fly stitch leaves. And then I've got 3 joined together here. So if you just have a little look at this quilt, I've got one in the middle here that's got no pattern on it. This is quite mad and busy with pattern, but there's a little quiet bit here. This would be a really nice one to do something like this on. You could join up those blocks there with a piece of embroidery. You could go all the way around, and this is just a back stitch down here. Here's my little V-shaped fly stitch. Here's my fly stitch. Oh, sorry, that's seeding, V-shaped seeding there. There's my fly stitch leaves and my lazy daisies. I'm just putting these stitches together just to make up a new design. And I think if you limit the number of stitches that you use, then you can have fun playing with it and it doesn't get too overwhelming. This is really nice to do, little monogram. We've had a little look at this already in the back stitch. It's really nice to sign your work, put your name on it and say that you made it. You could put dates on it as well, and just draw, you could do very simple lettering, just draw on your initials, back stitch along those. You could whip it or you could weave it as well if you want a bit of extra texture in there, and just make a really nice monogram. We're going to come back to this one in a second because I've actually stitched this one, so let's have a look at these 2. So this is the same one that I showed you previously, the same piece of fabric, just turned it round, and you could almost use it like a little stitch sampler if you like. I've shown you 5 stitches and the variations of those 5 stitches. There are hundreds of more stitches. We've got loads in the stitch library on the channel. Do go and check it out if you want to learn some more stitches. So you could just try just the stitch on its own, and you could just fill a little bit of your block with it. I've kind of done it in between the patterns. So I've got the little flower patterns here, and then I've put these designs in between, so you could have half sort of pattern in your fabric and half embellished with some stitches, which would look really beautiful together. You'd have to look really closely and see, oh, what's that on there, and you can see the stitches and the pattern of the fabric as well. So I've just done the individual stitches in here, just filled the shape in with those. I just made a really nice little sampler with it. And then this last one is another stripy bit of quilting, vintage quilting, and it's got the flowers down the middle and the stripes, and I've sort of taken the flower motif and made a big flower motif out of it. And this here is meant to be a little bit of a plique. We have a whole video about plique if you want to know about that. And the buttonhole blanket stitch is really good for applying another bit of fabric. I've actually got one here I can show you. So there's a little letter there that I've used to cut the fabric out and apply it, and then put that stitch around the edge to hold it in place. So just really nice way of adding another layer to your quilts if you wanted to. And then I have got my flowers coming out of that. So again, this sort of big seed head we've looked at, some lazy daisies, detached chains here for the little leaves, and the buttonhole wheels here and here. So you could start to really mix these up, make some lovely little designs. And this little chap here, the little butterfly made out of detached chains, so 4 detached chains with a fly stitch for his antennae and his little body there. So I will show you that because it's on a piece that I've got over here, and that's this piece. I'll show you that in a second, but I just want to show you one more bit of fabric. I've talked about responding to the pattern in your fabric already, but just wanted to show you this piece. This is a Lewis and Irene pattern. If you're a quilter, you will know about this design. Are really beautiful fabrics, but look at this one and all the pattern on here. So you could literally just stitch the pattern that's on there already. They've got leaves on here, got little seed heads on here, you've got stems, so you could just enhance the pattern that's already in your fabric and just stitch on that. So it's kind of like a pre-printed design, if you like. So it's very much about responding to your fabric. There's so many beautiful quilting fabrics out there, so have a little look at them, or get some out of your stash and see how would some embroidery work really nicely on this fabric. So I just want to come back to this design because this is a PDF that I have made up for you. If you want to have a little go at doing some stitching on a block and putting it in one of your quilts, this will be available to download from my free stuff page. So check out the link in the description below this video and you can click on that and go and download this design. Very simple design, but a really nice one just to start off with. And I've just actually stitched that, so I'll show you that now. So this is it here. So I've got this nice cream fabric that I found. And here is my little hexagon. So I put the hexagon on the fabric. I've stitched all the way around there. So I've just done a basting tacking stitch around the edge of that, so I know where my hexagon is going to be. Then I have done my stitching. So that's the design that I've shown you there. There's my little butterfly. I put a bit of seeding in the background. I haven't got the buttonhole on it because I'm going to do that when it's finished. So once you've finished your stitching, you can then take it out of the frame. I'm actually going to cut this. Obviously you've got to make sure you've got enough to turn over for your hexagon. So I've cut myself way more than I actually need there, but it's better to be safe than sorry. And then you can make up your paper piece and you can fold it and sew it. Just do that, you can see what that looks like. So I'm actually going to finish this off. I'm going to make a little design out of it, and you will see that in the image for this video, and I'll put it on my social media pages and on the community page as well as the stitches as well. I'll finish those off so you can see those clearly. So do check those out to have a closer look at the stitches that I've done in this video. So if you've been inspired by these stitches that I've shown you and these designs that we've looked at and you want to know more, we've got a project here for you which is a lot more embroidered flowers, which are absolutely fantastic on your quilt. You can check out this video up here. You can pop over there and have a look at that one and see how to do even more flowers, which are absolutely fabulous. So I hope you've enjoyed that video and you're inspired to go and stitch on your quilts. If you have enjoyed it, give me a thumbs up and I'll see you next time.